Hi, I hope everyone's doing okay out there. So when I did my trawl through the James Bond films, all 24 of them, and putting them in order of my least to favourite, I put a few feelers out for what some other things like that people might like to see, and one of the ones that cropped up was Doctor Who. So I'll get into it as quick as I can, but I'll do a quick of a preamble first. Just talk about Doctor Who, where it is in my sort of life, where it was, and then we'll do a little bit of about my favourite Doctors and the episodes that didn't make the cut, and then we'll do the top 10. So this could take a while. Doctor Who, I first started watching it like a lot of people when I was a kid, and my earliest memory, I think, is Davros, an episode called Genesis of the Daleks. Maybe I have some vague memory of Robot. I think it's late 74, but either way, I'm probably about 4 years old. Most cultural things that begin to make a cultural impact on me, I can date back to 1975. That's Bohemian Rhapsody, Mamma Mia. I remember I'm Not in Love by 10cc. I remember seeing Dr. No on the premiere on TV. That was 1975, apparently, when I checked it. So a lot of my earliest memories are from them. So yeah, I was probably like very scared, stuff like that. So Tom Baker was my Doctor, and that carried on into the Peter Davidson era. So going back through this, I'll just get out of the way that I haven't included any William Hartnell or Patrick Troughton episodes, and that's simply for the reason I've seen the odd ones, quite a few Patrick Troughtons, but because of black and white, and I kind of grew up in the colour era, I've never really bothered with anything before the John Pertwee era. I saw Tomb of the Cyberman when they rediscovered it, and I've watched the Web of Fear and the Invasion, Crotons, send more bed bodies for the diner trope. Yeah, that's quite a fun one, and various ones that were available. I think they're both fantastic character actors. I love William Hartnell. If you catch a film called Hell Drivers from 1957, Stanley Baker, Patrick McGowan. William Hartnell plays the corrupt boss of the trucking firm, and he's really good. Patrick Troughton, he's someone more familiar to all of us. He's in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. He's also the guy who runs over George Carter's wife in The Sweeney. And he's in various other things. He's in a great episode of Survivors as well. If you like Terry Nation's series Survivors, it's very prescient at the moment. If I had a copy of that, we should do a review of that. So I love Troughton, but it's just because I don't watch that era. He will be discussed because he may make an appearance. But they're great history, and people who will have watched those episodes back then will obviously love them, but I didn't really grow up in that time. As far as other Doctors go, obviously there's Pertwee and Baker. Baker's my favourite Doctor, although I don't think he's consistently brilliant. I think he tails off starts to tail off somewhere in season 4, certainly season 5 a bit, although that's good. But he outstays it. He should have quit after series 5, I think. Like Roger Moore, he should have stopped after 5 or 6. He shouldn't have done the last ones. John Pertwee's great. Not the actor that Tom Baker or certainly Patrick Troughton is. I mean, there's an argument Hartnell and Troughton are better actors than those guys. But obviously Tom Baker's incredibly charismatic. But John Pertwee's a great variety performer, a comedic actor, and he's the kind of Roger Moore action man of Doctor Who for me. Peter Davidson, I like the Davidson era, not as much, but obviously he's a fine actor. He's proved himself before that in All Creatures Great and Small, and beyond that in loads of stuff like Campion and A Very Peculiar Practice. And he's a top bloke, and he always comes out for Who. Then Colin Baker, I never had as big a problem with Colin Baker as other people did. I thought his outfit was ridiculous, but I actually quite liked the first series of Colin Baker. It's not that bad. I remember sort of it piquing my interest a little more at the time, just because I had a new Doctor. I kind of tailed off from Peter Davidson in his final series, which I'll come to. And then you've got Sylvester McCoy, just no truck with that. I just don't think Sylvester McCoy was an actor, or not an actor enough. I'm sure he's done better acting. I know he's appeared in Shakespeare and stuff like that with Ian McKellen. He's actually appeared up at our very own 3 Tons in Gateshead with Ian McKellen one night. They just pulled the budget out of it. It's got Licorice All Salt Men and stuff like that, and we could say it's going that way now. So that's basically Escape through those Doctors. When Doctor Who came back with Christopher Eccleston, I really liked what they did. I didn't like some things. I didn't like the underscoring, the music sometimes. Some episodes are better than others. Eccleston's take on the character had some really good elements. Sometimes he fell back on wackiness, but there were some really good stories in that first Eccleston one. The first episode wasn't very good. The very often never are first Doctor Who episodes when you got a new Doctor. But the second and third one were good. There was the one about the end of the world. There was a Charles Dickens one. And then there was a rubbish one with a Sylvine, I think. And then there's one about Dalek, which is all right. And then they had, I think, I could be wrong, there was an episode called Rose, which I thought was very effective. And then I did what I think is maybe his classic episode, which is Are You My Mummy? With the gas mask. It's 2 parts. You got the monsters and gas masks, and that was really creepy. I thought it was very good. And that series finished pretty well. There was a big 3-part. I wasn't so keen on the bit on the spaceship with the Trini and Susanna robots. But it was good, and then Eccleston left, which was a shame because he was just getting in the swing. But then they got Tennant in. I think David Tennant looked better. He's a little more sort of wacky in his look. Kind of Christopher Eccleston is kind of like classed in Daniel Craig, as a Doctor Who kind of thing. So getting David Tennant in, he kind of had the Jarvis Cocker look. And I thought Tennant, they built on what they did with Eccleston, and for 2 series it was really good. Although, I get a bit tired of stories about Rose's mum and stuff like that. But then it started to get inflated and puffed up. Doctor Who got very popular, and it kind of, to me, it got a bit puffed up with itself, and just some of the plotting and some of the aspects of the stories in the final season were a bit over the top. The very last episode where he threw himself out of a spaceship. Obviously, it's a long, haven't seen these since they were on. And he went around in the last 4 specials they did. Sorry, scratching my head. He went round and visited everyone he'd ever known or something like that. It was just all massively overblown and drawn out. But I did like an episode called The Waters of Mars, and I thought the end of that was very strong. I think it was Lindsay Duncan. So Tennant, it was good. And I thought I had really good chemistry with Catherine Tate. I wasn't fussed when I first heard she was cast because I didn't like the story she was in prior to that. But it was very funny. And the first episode I did with the Fat Babies was very funny with Sarah Lancashire in. So that was Tennant. So things were starting to go a little bit wrong. Obviously, Russell T Davies went away from it. And Stephen Moffat took over more, who was his script editor. And then it just started to get overblown. The underscoring got more intense. I brought Matt Smith in. I think Matt Smith's a really good actor. He's got an interesting look. But it just got too wacky. The plots were moving too quickly. I hated Amy Pond. No problem with Karen Gillan, but having Amy Pond and her husband, and that just annoyed us. So there's probably about 3 Matt Smith stories I liked. There was one with like sort of ghosts from the past. Towards the end, there was the Ice Warriors one I quite liked. There was another one. Didn't like the special he did with all the other Doctors in, like John Hurt in it, but just couldn't understand it, couldn't follow it. And I think that's where, when we look back at the old Doctor Who's, what happens is the Doctor Who's like Sherlock Holmes, obviously has his foes, Moriarty, the Master, and you could argue Davros at times is a bit of a Moriarty type foe. But basically, he'll land on the planet and something will be amiss, and he will investigate. He will try and work out what's going on. And when we're a bit confused, the audience, the assistant will often say, Doctor, but why are we doing this, or what's this? And then the Doctor will kind of explain it. So it's not like he's giving lots of exposition. And I know that might be sort of patronising in the modern era to if the female character's assistant is a female character. But it just worked for the plotting, and it makes the plotting make sense and you can follow it. When the Doctors in the modern ones, there's lots of effects and the Doctor's just shouting information and using his sonic screwdriver, or she is, as now is the case, it doesn't work for me. So Matt Smith finished a lot of, he was the most successful Doctor I think ever in terms of exporting worldwide, so he did a lot for the series, but I just couldn't get into it. I liked the casting of Peter Capaldi. I preferred having an older Doctor. Although he was a lot older than Tom Baker and John, or more like John Pertwee's age, he had that sort of patriarchal figure look that I liked, that goes back to William Hartnell and Peter Cushing, if you've seen the 2 Amicus Doctor Who films from that time. A good Doctor, Peter Cushing. I like Capaldi's take, who's bringing in a wee bit of Baker. There's a very funny sort of Baker sequence with some sushi, riff on the Jelly Babies. So, love Capaldi. He's probably my fifth favourite Doctor, fourth or fifth. But again, the stories, I liked The Mummy on the Orient Express. I liked The Witch is Familiar, which is the double Davros episode. We'll come to that later on. And there was probably another one, but there was one ridiculous episode where he punched through a wall for like, I don't know, have several billion years to save Clara. Just ridiculous things like that, just going over the top. Interestingly enough, she said Jenna Coleman's a very fine actress, and her chemistry with Peter Capaldi was better than it was with Matt Smith, sort of mirroring the Sarah Jane John Pertwee going to Tom Baker era. So now we've got Jodie Whittaker. I'm not going to go into that and get into the politics of that, because that's too long. At the end of the day, I don't think the story's good. I don't think the cast is good. I think there's too many companions. Why'd you put a new doctor with 3 companions that are going to suck oxygen from her character? But I just don't. I think it's time for it to call time for a bit. It's been going 15 years now since it came back. Next month soon, I think. So I just think for me, it's time to call time on it. And I think the BBC should consider teaming up with Netflix, get back to half-hour episodes and put a proper cliffhanger in so you can binge it. 45 minutes or double 45-minute episodes don't work for me. So you can have half-hour episodes with recaps, and that'll get you into that 25-minute classic format. An actor who I consider casting as Doctor Who is an actor, and it would be casting a black actor, which I haven't done before, but if there were people talk about, that should happen, a black actor or person, of another ethnicity or ethnic heritage, as an actor in Humans. He's an android and he's got amazing eyes, and he looks very otherworldly, and I think he would be someone you could consider. The other one, I think, is Dan... What's his second name? He's in Downton Abbey. Dan Stevens. Yeah, Dan Stevens. He's got like really vivid eyes, and I think he could be, if you watch The Man Who Invented Christmas, the film about Charles Dickens, he's kind of dressed up in dandyish clothes, a bit like Tom Baker, a bit like John Pertwee, and I think he could make a good Doctor. So that's just my sort of take on that. So I've just spent 13 minutes. Okay, the stuff that didn't make the cut. Oh, okay, so... basically, your awesome seasons of Doctor Who, there's 2, there's 13 and 14. They're just solid gold. Tom Baker ones. They will be featuring heavily. The ones that didn't make the cut from John Pertwee era, there's Terror of the Autons and The Claws of Axos from his second season. I think that's season 8. And The Daemons. So those are all really cool episodes. Terry Orton's got the Master in for the first time. It's brilliant. Roger Delgado, R.I.P. Awesome. From his third season, got Sea Devils, and that's cracking. I think that's at season 9. Sea Devils is really good. So that was considered. And from season 10, his second last season, is Carnival of Monsters. Now, the reason why I love John Pertwee's Doctor Who and why I got into him was back in November 1981, they ran some repeats of Doctor Who. They showed Carnival of Monsters and The Three Doctors. Later on, maybe 83, when it was the 25th anniversary, they showed The Curse of Peladon. So I love Carnival of Monsters, just loved that as a kid with the Jurassics. Then Tom, a lot of Tom ones here. First season of Tom, Ark in Space, great one that. Then Terror of the Zygons, which is basically Invasion of the Body Snatchers, will come to this thing that what they do is where they take elements of other sci-fi or literature and adapt it into the Doctor Who universe. Another one from that same season is Brain and Morbius, fantastic. It's basically a riff on Frankenstein. With the brain of the rogue Time Lord Morbius. Fantastic sequence. Tom and Morbius, the monster that's carrying the brain of Morbius, have like a mind battle, and it goes back through all the incarnations, ones we haven't seen. Awesome. Then another favourite, my favourite films of all time is The Manchurian Candidate. Fantastic riff on that is The Deadly Assassin. that features the appearance of the Master after a long time, but he's decayed. And that's one I remember as a kid. And it comes immediately after he said goodbye to Sarah Jane, one of the most moving moments in Doctor Who history, which is an episode called The Hand of Fear. Just for uninitiated, Sarah Jane's the greatest companion ever, the great Liz Sladen, rest in peace. That was, sorry to go on, but the Hand of Fear episode, was it called School Days or something like that? I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was early in the Tennant run. He went to school to a school to investigate something, and a journalist showed up with Sarah Jane, and she has a go at the Doctor for how he leaves her, because he literally just drops her on the street. He gets a call from the Time Lords, who are very kind of shrouded in mystery up until that point, and he has to go and investigate, and he gets made a patsy, basically. He gets framed JFK style, if you want to get into conspiracy theories. So, Deadly Assassin, really good. Mask of Mandragora, it's another one. That one's filmed in, where is it? Port Merion, where they filmed The Prisoner, so that's a really popular one for that reason. Then Tom Baker's 4th season, last two of the Gothic horror greats. Horror of Fang Rock, it's set on a lighthouse. Obviously, lighthouses are creepy. It's got a great villains, the Rootons. They take over people. That's a really creepy one. Early episode with Leela. And then there's Image of the Fendal. This is the last Gothic one. It's a skull, a riff on the skull, which is the old Hammer horror. Or is it Amicus? And it's got Wanda Ventham in that, who is the mother of Benedict Cumberbatch, so a little reference there. And then the Stones of Blood, which is from the Key to Time series. That was another one of Tom's, didn't make it. And the Rebos Operation, which is the first episode of the Key to Time. Very good, lovely costume design on Mary Tam on that. Love Mary Tam. So actually the Key to Time is where I think Tom Baker should have left Doctor Who. So if he did the Key to Time and then basically battled the Black Guardian at the end and had to regenerate, I think that would have finished it nicely. For people who wouldn't be aware, the Key to Time had a 6-story, obviously 6 stories in the series, but you had to find one element each segment of the Key to Time. So, and then just a lot of people love Logopolis, Tom Baker's last ever episode. I watched it a while ago. I don't like that. Just all the kind of science stuff and that. But it is, an iconic moment in the series because he falls off Jodrell Bank. Well, it's a studio, and then it maybe it cuts. I don't know if it cuts to the real Jodrell Bank, but he regenerates. Great sequence from the Watcher, the Merge, and Tom's era was over, and we went into Peter Davidson. A couple of Peter Davidson ones didn't make it, were Earthshock and Kinder, both from his first season. Earthshock is well known for the tragic ending where Adric dies. It's the only time a companion's died, I think, properly up until that point and beyond. Could be wrong with the new stuff because I've zoned out a bit. It just, when it stops, it doesn't have the theme tune at the end, it just runs the credits. It's also got an amazing ending. Basically, he's trying to solve a mathematical equation to stop a bomb going off or something, or move the ship. I can't remember. The ship ends up colliding with Earth, but it goes back 65 million years in time, and it actually destroys the dinosaur. So it's utterly pointless what Adric did. The ship, he stays on the ship for no reason. It goes through some time jump. You should have got off the ship, Adric, because it was all preordained. Then Kinder's like a mad episode. It's a little bit studio bound, but it's got one of my favourite lines. You can't mend people. If you watch it, you'd understand what that meant. So I've spent nearly 19 minutes, and that's just, we haven't even got a Colin Baker yet. There's no Colin Baker one's made this, but Revelation of the Daleks is good. The episode of his last season, the last episode of his first season. Vengeance on Varos is quite an interesting one, particularly in the era we live in now, with social media and social media politics. People vote from there. It's a bit like Black Mirror. People vote from their living rooms on every decision on the death penalty and things like that. So it's like pure plebiscite democracy, populism. The two Doctors are quite good fun. Patrick Troughton's in that, and then there's the Attack of the Cybermen. Yeah, and the one they film at the Time in the Rani or Mark of the Rani, they film that at where's it called? Oh, it comes to miss. It's just in near Chesley Street, the old place. Right. Okay, so we've done that. That's the preamble. Let's we'll get the first thing out of the way. I'm cheating because I couldn't decide it was pretty easy to pick these, and then I forgot one episode. And then when I picked them, I thought, I cannot take that for the other, so I'm cheating. I'm actually picking 11, and 10th position is tied with 2 Jon Pertwee episodes. So the first one's the aforementioned Curse of Peladon. This was first transmitted in 1972. It had peak viewing figures of 11 million, and its average viewing figure was about 9.3 million. So it's a really tight 4-episode, written by Brian Hales. And basically it's fantastic. John and Joe Grant, Katie Manning, they land on the planet Peladon, and they're kind of at a UN meeting. It's basically different aliens and different representatives from different races, and they're just trying to sort stuff out, a bit like the UN. And you've got Alpha Centauri, who's a kind of got a green head and one eye, and there's the Ice Warriors. They're there. And it's just a really good episode. It's really tightly written, and there's a fearsome beast called Agador. He dwells in the caves and the mines of Peladon. But the Doctor manages to hypnotise him with a Venusian lullaby, which I'll not sing now, but it's great. A classic Jon Pertwee. Jon Pertwee, by this time, he's in full flow. He's got his velvet, smoking jacket. He's got his ruff. He's just a man of action. I'm doing a Venusian Aikido move there. And it's just a lovely episode. It really is a high point of Pertwee era. So that's my first one in at number 10. So this is tied with, and I'm just going to flip over my page there for my notes, and it's tied with the season 10 ender. So this is his all but one season last, The Green Death. So this is a 6-parter. It's still Jon Pertwee with Joe Grant, Katie Manning. So Joe Grant was his assistant from Terror of the Autons, which is his second season all the way through to this. So she's one of the longest serving assistants. She might be the longest. I don't know. I have to think about that in terms of episodes. But anyway, the peak viewing figure on this was 9.2 million. Its average viewing figures were about 7.5. This is written by Robert Sloman and is directed by a guy called Michael Bryant, who directs some good episodes. So this is a really good episode. It's weird, obviously the environment's a thing that was a concern all those years ago in the 60s and early 70s. You get like the sort of Gaia theory and Mother Earth, stuff like that. So the Green Death's present day. Basically, there's a mine or some kind of industrial company, and they're doing dodgy things with their waste, and basically it infects the environment and ends up with giant mutated creatures, and they've got giant maggots in it. It's industrial waste. It's actually got 2 miners in it, 2 characters, Dave and Bert, and that's obviously the times it's set in that period. There would be a lot of the representation of miners on TV just because there was strikes back then. So that's interesting. Like Doctor Who often has, characters from different areas of the class system. You get the, military, you get the very upper class, you often get really posh people. I suppose the Doctor's kind of middle class, really. His assistants tend to be. And Dave and Bert are representing the working class characters in this episode. So they're top. So yeah, around this time there's another series called Doomwatch, which I think is probably finished by then. But Doomwatch, there was basically a team that looked at like environmental issues, a science fiction thing. So it's got elements of there's probably been a bit influenced by that with the mutated creatures. What this is most well known for, it's really well paced, but the Joe Grant character meets an environmental activist professor. Was he a doctor? Can't remember. And slowly through the episode she falls in love with him. It's really good, really well done. And at the end the doctor goes, "Right, Joe, let's get off." And Joe goes, "No, I'm staying here with her new beau." And Jon Pertwee's like, the doctor's just crestfallen. And the final image is, if he drives a little yellow car called Bessie, and it's just him driving over the horizon in the dark, a bit about sunset, and he just drives off, and that's the end of the Joe Grant is his assistant. And interestingly enough, Jon Pertwee would do another season after this, but his family, as they call it, was starting to break up. Katie Manning had gone and brought in Liz Sladen, who he was great friends with, but obviously Barry Letts and the series runner and Terence Dicks, I think was a script editor. They were going to move on. So basically that whole era was going to come to an end. So that's The Green Death tied with Curse of Peladon in number 10. So we're up to 25 minutes. We're in at number 9. This is going to go in 2 parts. Next one, this is great. I love this one. It's Tom Baker. It's season 13, the great season 13. Tom Baker's first season, season 12. So the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, yeah. Season 13 is The Seeds of Doom. So this is a 6-parter, but it's an interesting 6-parter. So it's written by Robert Banks Stewart. Robert Banks Stewart was a writer who later on went to create 2 great TV detectives. One of my faves, Eddie Shoestring with Trevor Eve. And then he also was the creator of Bergerac, which is a hugely successful series. The other one thing about this episode is directed by a guy called Douglas Camfield, and he's very big in Doctor Who folklore. He's one of the best directors, and a lot of classic episodes or good episodes were directed by Dougie Camfield, as he's called. So what this does, it basically takes the plot idea from Quatermass. So in the late 1950s, the writer Nigel Neal creates the character of Bernard Quatermass, and he does Quatermass Experiment, Quatermass in the Pit, I think. There's a film later on of Quatermass in the Pit. And I'm not sure, maybe this is the Quatermass Experiment, this copies. Don't quote me on this. Basically, it starts off, it's a 6-parter, but it's effectively a 2 and a 4-parter. So the 2-part bit, the start bit, is the Doctor lands in Antarctica and infiltrates or comes into contact with a research team. They've found an alien plant, the crinoid plant, and this plant basically infects one of them on the team. It's a bit like The Thing as well, Thing from Another World. And he turns into this plant creature. I can't remember if they destroy him or whether somehow the crinoid plant or the plant person gets back to England. And then so the next 4 parts, the Doctor comes into contact with a guy in a stately home called Harrison Chase. Great name, but what's more great, this is played by a guy called Tony Beckley. And you'll know Tony Beckley because Camp Freddy, you all know. Yeah, he's Camp Freddy in The Italian Job. So anyway, Harrison Chase is great eccentric. He's kind of villainous. He wears black leather gloves. And he loves his plants, and the crinoid plant's a living thing. So basically, unit get involved, and the crinoid plant takes over the whole house, and it destroys it. It's got great special effects, the type that they'd use on the goodies and that. And they look rubbish, but it's all the fun of the show. You don't need special effects when you've got great stories and a great character. This is firing on all 6. The viewing figures on this, the peak was 11.5 million, and there was 11 million average viewings. It's 1975. This I should just say that The Green Death was 1973. I think The Seeds of Doom. I'm doubting myself now. Maybe it's 76. Probably 76. Sorry. Okay, so that was in 9th place. So now we're going into 8th place. So this one is a fun one. Some people criticise the daftness of this, but I saw this on a rerun in 1981, and it's the 3 Doctors. So this is written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin. Peak viewing figures just under 12 million. Average viewing figures 10.5 million at the time. It's from 1973. So this was to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the show. Basically, they bring back Hartnell and Troughton, and they'll do this as the series goes on. They might do the 5 Doctors, and so on. So what's brilliant with this is seeing the interplay. Now, William Hartnell was very poorly by then, so he just appears on a screen, and he's kind of trapped on his TARDIS, so he can't interact properly with Pertwee and Troughton. But he's still great. He basically kind of puts them down, and he's very funny. He basically plays the crotchety old man. The interplay between Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee is fantastic. I think John Pertwee is wearing his sort of orangey brown velvet jacket. I actually had a jacket a bit that colour, thinking about it. Many years ago, but so they're just on top form. You've got the great Patrick Troughton in, and then John. Then the plot, they basically go to another planet. It's got these squidgy monsters turning up down at Unit. I should just say that Unit is basically where all the John Pertwee episodes are generally set. He gets confined to Earth by the Time Lords at the start of his run. So sometimes he's allowed special dispensation by the Time Lords to go from Earth into other galaxies on the TARDIS. So again, it's taking the Quatermass thing there. You've got like the professor figure working with a military team to solve problems. So with this one, the Time Lords end up hooking him up with the other two Doctors. So it starts off on Earth, and then they find what the problem is, and it's a Time Lord who's one of the greatest Time Lords of all time, Omega. And they all thought he was dead, but he is in exile on this planet, and he's causing all the problems. What's awesome is eventually, near the end, Omega takes off his mask and there's nothing there. He's actually dead. He exists by will alone. He's so awesome. He's so powerful. He's just existing by force of will. So that's great fun. It's really funky 70s stuff. Love that one. So the next one is a late classic in the Baker era. Basically, the Baker era starts to go pear-shaped for me at the end of, in the middle of his season 14. Is it 15? Oh, hold on, I'm getting muddled up here. I'm muddling up my seasons. So don't quote me on that. Basically, it's the Key to Time season. The season before that, sorry. You start off, you've got good episodes. You've got Horror Fang Rock, Invisible Enemy, which is quite good fun. It's basically Fantastic Voyage. He gets injected in someone. And then you've got Image of the Fendal, which I mentioned before. And then you've got the Sunmakers. Now, a lot of people like that. It's a satire on tax and the tax, the high tax of the 1970s. But it just, it looks a bit like Blake Seven episode. Then there's Underworld, which has got bad effects, but I quite like. But it finishes a really crap episode called The Invasion of Time. It's one of my least favourite Baker episodes. It it goes on and on, it's crap. And it has a chase through TV Centre or something. And then the next one's the Key to Time season. And then after that, it's a pretty ropey season. The episodes aren't great, although I do like The Creature from the Pit. Starts off with Destiny of the Daleks, not very good. So anyway, the end of this season, the last episode isn't shown. It's called Sharda. Because of the strikes, basically, it never gets finished, It's like what's happened now. TV programs have been furloughed, there's episodes not been made. Obviously, it's a different reason. But back then, it's because of industrial action at the BBC. The union system at the BBC back then was very, hardcore, like a lot of them, trade union systems. So, you couldn't sort of, move a chair or equipment. The correct person had to do it. But anyway, digressing, in the middle of this season that's not very good, there's an episode called City of Death, and it's absolutely brilliant. So this is actually a record viewing figures for Doctor Who. The peak viewing was 16.1 million, and its average was 14.5. The rest of the season wasn't as well viewed, so I don't know why people tuned in. It's written by David Agnew, but that's a pen name for the producer, Graham Williamson. And the